Hello. Leavers, believers, everybody else, anybody else, all of you. Welcome to Leaving Hillsong. My name is Tanya. And I think for everyone looking back on Leaving Hillsong, a really big part of it is how it has affected your mental health, as well as all kinds of other aspects of your life. But what's it like when you already have a diagnosis of a serious mental health condition? Now, I've known Sarah for quite a few years, and she is an extraordinarily brave woman. She is very open about her diagnosis and has spoken in her workplace and openly in other forums along the way. And she very kindly agreed to talk with us because she was also in Hillsong for a number of years. She's an executive working full-time. She's got children. She has a partner. She has a very, very busy life. And her insights are always so interesting, so helpful to the conversation. And her advocacy is just so invaluable. I know you're going to find Delusions of Reference really, really interesting. It's no longer a question, I guess, of how they affect people's minds in places like these churches with quotes around it. It's now just a question of how much. So, I know you've got your snacks. Settle in for Delusions of Reference with Sarah. Hey, Sarah.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, good. How you doing?
Good.
Yeah. I was just thinking we had one of those conversations the other day where we were like, yeah, so much good stuff was coming out and we were like, oh, we should have recorded it. Would have made a great podcast.
Exactly right.
So we should try a reenactment. It shouldn't be that hard. I really appreciate your time. You're a very busy person. Wear a number of hats, as they say. So thank you so much for your time.
Right.
Yeah, where do you want to kick off? I mean, we're going to jump into the topic of mental health and Hillsong, or perhaps, mental illness and Hillsong. As someone who's been through it, who has had a diagnosis and has attended Hillsong, really interested in what it was like for you. So put us on the map, first of all, with kind of what years you were there.
Sure. So I was Hillsong for about 6 years. I was at the city campus, which was just Waterloo back then. And I was there from late 2002 to 5, 6, 7, 8, early 2000, maybe I'd say 5.5 years. So up to early 2008. So I think when I joined, it was kind of just after the Frank stuff had happened. So I didn't really know about it, but there was still this weird cloud of energy.
Yeah. Right. Like the years after. Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, you tell me, when did you get a diagnosis?
Yeah.
How had you been experiencing life before that? I mean, tell me much or as little of your history as you feel comfortable.
Yeah, sure. So as you know, Tanya is my friend, and I'm quite open just generally about my mental health stuff and my story. So pretty sure I was 19 or 20 when I joined Hillsong. And at that point, my diagnosis was major depression and PTSD. But later on, my diagnosis was bipolar disorder, which still is the case and makes complete sense now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
what drew you to Hillsong, do you think, looking back now?
Well, at that time, I think I was, my life was a bit crap. I think I was just in a situation, like I think I was kind of searching, and I think I was I just was really desperate for a sense of escape, not just from my, like, the mental health struggles that I had and this idea that, like, this is how life is going to be forever. but also just I think from my situation that I was in, I was with this guy who was just not good for me, and I was just in this crappy kind of living situation with him. And so I think one, I was kind of searching, and secondly, I think there was this sense of escape. Like I just needed to feel like I could get out.
Well,
I would say that
what was first time like? Who took you? I mean, someone.
Yeah, so there were a couple of people that I had worked with at a job that I was at previously, and one of them had started going to this church, and the other one had been at that church, and I didn't know her that well, but she had been there, and then she kind of came worked for us, and then she was kind of not churchy for a while, and then she went back to it, and I'd just never heard of it, but she kind of stayed in touch with me, and anyway, somehow I ended up there with her. And it was all very new to me because I hadn't really been raised in church really at all, let alone like the Pentecostal stuff. So yeah. So I went to a service. Yeah.
Okay. And what made you continue? You must have liked something about it.
Oh, I don't know. I think it was a bit weird. I wasn't like weirded out, but it was a bit very strange to me. But I think I think the exposure I had to Christianity and God, like I had some personal experiences as a child.
Okay.
My mum's atheist. My dad was Christian, but not really practicing. So I'd kind of been here and there a couple of times with him, to a Baptist church or to here, but not really churchy church. But I felt like when I was a child, I think I had some special kind of connection to God. I was in my own way. And then I just kind of went out the window for a long time. And then I think when I was there, I think I felt like, oh, they actually, because I went to a Catholic school as well. And I just felt like no one really like does any of this. It's just, where I think Hillsong, they're very, no, this is the Bible and we live the Bible and this is how we live. And so I thought, oh, they're like doing what it says. So I felt, at the time, I felt it was like a genuine following of Christianity.
Yeah, that seems pretty reasonable. I mean, how long was it before your mental health stuff got tested there? Like,
yeah, I think it was kind of part of what hooked me, I think, because when you live with the diagnosis, and it was something that was significantly impacting me a lot at that time, and I just didn't. You're kind of living with this idea. It's like, no, you're always going to have this, and you just got to learn how to manage it. But when you're always feeling like crap, like you're not really, you kind of have periods of time where things are kind of okay, but then you're not really okay. And then I just think, because this idea that there's help outside of the medical world, there's help outside of the physical world that we know. There's this, healer, there's Jesus the healer, and there's God as the healer, and there's this spiritual component, and it's like this magical thing that's like, no, you can heal from the things that are, and then I think the idea appealed to me because I'm like, no, I don't have to, it's not going to be this way forever. It's not going to be this way for the rest of my life. So I think it was a sense of hope, as false as it was at times.
Yeah. Sounds kind of reasonable to me. I mean, that's what you get presented with.
Yeah.
How involved did you end up getting? Like, were you doing the several times a week?
I got involved pretty quick because I kind of went a few times, and then I did the, does anyone want to get saved? And I did the hand thing. And then I think, you get loved on pretty quickly, because there's like this whole new Christian scene. You go there and they come up to you and they give you the Bible and shake your hand and they take you in for the coffee into the new Christians room, and you got to get in a connect group. Let's get you in a connect group. Let's get you connected. And here's the new Christians pastor, and here's his people, and come and talk to these people over here. So I think it's very, very like get you connected really quickly to a lot of people, and I think quite quickly I got involved in serving. I don't know. I can't remember the first team I was serving in, but there was like, they used to do discovery courses, which was like the new Christian courses. I did those courses, and then after I did them, I was like helping on that team. Yeah, I ended up serving on a few different teams, and eventually I was in like a really crappy situation, like living situation. I got away from the guy. But I think it was like, this was like the cop out that I needed to. It's like, no, I'm religious now, so we can't be together.
Yeah. Perfect.
So I was like, oh, it's God's fault. Don't blame me.
How did that work?
I mean, I left, like, I think I just felt really obligated to be, I was with this guy for 4 years and it was just really
Okay.
kind of an abuse situation. And I was very young. And I don't know why. I think, when you're a young girl, you feel like you owe people stuff. Like, I should have just left because I wanted to leave and shouldn't have felt like I needed some, like, reason that wasn't me doing it. I don't know. So it worked.
Yeah.
Left. Yeah. So, yeah, I got involved pretty quickly. And when I got away from him, I ended up in a Christian share house situation with a bunch of Hillsong College students. And yeah, so I was there. So I was kind of just living, I was there. And then, like, I was at church. So I kind of went to a couple of services a week. I was serving on this team. And then I was serving on, like, the Hillsong Emerge Street team for a while. And I was like, there was some other team I was serving on, I can't remember. And then I started doing night college. I just got really absorbed really quickly. I didn't really like the youth ministry. I don't know. I found the whole thing really overwhelming. So I hung out with, like, the frontliners. Yeah. So I got involved very quickly. Yeah.
And I mean, you, as long as I've known you, you've always been a full-time working person. Were you working during the day and then doing having all these extra responsibilities?
Yeah. I worked full time. I always worked full time. So I'd, like, work full time and then, like, go home and then go to church because I've got to serve this, or I'd go straight to church because I've got to serve after work. Yeah. So I was very busy, but I think it was just like, you're swapping one thing for another and you're just trying to keep yourself busy with this idea, like, idea that, I think it was like this idea, well, if I'm at church more and I'm doing, religious activity more and I'm serving more and I read the Bible more, then maybe God will heal me.
Oh.
Maybe that's the breakthrough. Maybe that's like I thought, like, oh, this might happen faster. Or maybe it's just, this is going to open me to the breakthrough. And then the testimonies that you hear as well, like, especially the ones that they, like, put up there, the really performative ones, like, oh, I was in jail and I was, like, did this many drugs every day, I was here, but then God saved me and then I was over here and then I was preaching over here. And, like, those types of testimonies that, like, it's like, I don't know what it is. Is there, like, a term called, like, testimony porn? It was like,
well, yeah,
I don't know. Testimony porn.
I kept thinking, like, we were not as nice people perhaps as we are now when we were teenagers, but there was a guy who used to share at our youth group, and a friend of mine we used to call him rats in his eyes because, like, that's how extreme it would be, because he'd be like, and then I was in the gutter and I had rats in my eyes, but, like, he didn't say that, but it felt like that. So
another story, and it's like, do you feel like are you telling the story because you really enjoy telling people all this stuff, or because you're like,
well,
no,
is your miracle, is your salvation as, like, important and cool if it isn't bigger and better than anybody?
Yeah, that's what I felt like. It's like, oh, you have this thing. So I was like, okay, well, I've come from, like, here and here and here and here. And I've got this, like, really terrible mental illness. I know it was true, but, like, and then I'm like, oh, cool, God's going to do this thing. And then when you go to the service, like, because on every one Wednesday a month, they call it a healing service or a Holy Spirit service. And I think this was like the remnant of Frank, because I think after Brian took over, it was less like tonguesy and spiro in the actual like in main services. I think the gifts and all of that, like those types of things, like I think Brian liked a bit more order and less of that, the spiro stuff in the services. But I think it's still
very
like behind the scenes,
very contentious.
Yeah, I think he took it in a bit of a different direction. So I think the Wednesday, I think that was like the Frank remnant of, like, oh, this is the Holy Spirit service, and this is where, it's just free, there's prophecy and speaking in tongues and this and people falling over and doing weird shit. So I don't know, like, I had a couple of experiences there that felt really profound at the time. I still don't fully know what to make of, to be honest.
There's a YouTube video called The Town That Caught Tourette's, and all the 10 girls, and they're picking it up on TikTok as well. Like, they're picking up tics from each other. It's like a social communication thing. Yeah.
No.
There's this entire, like, this school where so many of the girls developed symptoms of Tourette syndrome just from hearing. Well, not just from hearing. I didn't judge for yourself. It's worth a look. But yeah, it's. Sorry, I'm not trying to put answers in your.
No, that's really interesting, because I think there is, like, it's like when there's it's like this mass kind of, you're there and it's happening and it's kind of happening all around you. And I guess it's like almost a suggestive thing. And then, the thing they do when they kind of sway you, they're like, got their hand on your head and then just kind of pushing you and they're trying to like sway you and like, yes, Holy Spirit, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know.
But the first time
We almost kind of question some of them.
the first time we got pushed, like, it's such a shock.
So there was all that. And then, you get these prophecies. And I think for me, and back then I didn't, later my diagnosis of bipolar made so much sense. But this prophecy that's like, you're going to be this and you're going to preach to the nation. And you start like thinking about these like scriptures in Isaiah and all these like Old Testament books that are really just like really deeply symbolic and stuff that we have no concept of. But it was like, oh, kind of started to read these scriptures and personalize, oh, God's speaking to me through this and he's telling me that, and the seven-headed beast is this in my life. And you start like, that's like, to me, that's delusions of reference. Because I just felt like...
Sorry, what's delusions of reference?
When you're personalizing, when you're reading a Bible...
Okay.
And you're reading a book like Isaiah and you're reading a book like Revelation and talking about seven-headed beasts and all this stuff that's like had really specific meaning in that situation in that book that requires proper interpretation, but you're personalizing it to your current. Yes, God's telling me that I'm being persecuted and that he's going to be the beast that blah, blah, blah. And you start like reading the Bible like, oh yeah, God's saying that to me and he's speaking to me and this is the...
Isn't that what they tell you to do, though? I mean, you take it as yours.
Yeah, because yeah, and then the whole thing, like, the holy and this whole thing, I don't know if they still say this stuff, but like, that you'll get, if you feel like God's telling you something, ask for confirmation and the Holy Spirit would give you 3 confirmations. I don't even know where the says that. But later they say that. And I started going a bit like, it's weird because I think it did hook into that manic aspect of the way my brain is, because that their grandiosity, and it's like you're special and you're going to be this and you're going to be this star. So it's like, it's not just the escapism that I think I was really vulnerable to at that time and that I probably wanted, but also the mania, the madness of like, you're extraordinary, you're special, you're different, you're chosen by God, you're anointed for this, you're going to preach to nations. It's like this thing, and you're seeing how people are treating. You're seeing this kind of sense of celebrity in the hierarchy and the culture and how people are on stage and everyone like, and it does, like, you start to want that and you start to think, oh, that's going to, that I'm not just leaving this life behind, but I'm going to have this kind of testimony and then I'm going to have this, I'm going to go from this to this. It's not enough just to say, can I just have an ordinary life and just be content in working a normal job and not being some weird Christian celebrity and living a normal life. And there's no, it's not like encouraging you to be like, hey, like, let's find peace and contentment in that. It's just this like hype, like this weird hypeness. And I think for someone with bipolar disorder who is, has a vulnerability to that kind of thinking and even the psychosis aspect of like the, delusions of reference and delusions of grandiosity, thinking that they're this really important person and then God's speaking to them through the TV and then God's speaking to them through some verse in Isaiah that has absolutely nothing to do with you or your situation or your job or anything at all. It's talking about some like event of the Babylonians doing this. It's got absolutely nothing to do with you. And I think the way they encourage you to interpret the Bible and hear from God is really like, I feel like that feeds into mental illness and psychosis.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So the very things that they're telling you to do would be psychiatrically frowned upon anywhere else.
I would think so. I think that it's highly like suggestible, and I think it does. I think it does prey on people's vulnerabilities who are prone to mental illness, and even people who aren't. Because
Right.
And I've said this to you, Tanya. People that I've known, I knew 20 years ago. Like I knew them quite well, and we're at a lot of the things together and socialize. And they're like, they seem like, I mean, I don't like the word, but like they seem quite normal. Like I was mentally ill. It's like, yeah, you seem like a normie, right?
Yeah.
And living these lives, and they're just, one works in finance and this one's over here, and living these normal lives, going to their place to have a barbecue, and then suddenly they're caught up. Like, you see them on Facebook 20 years later, and they're really strange with you, and they have these ideas. They've bought right into the QAnon stuff.
Okay.
Around like the time when like the whole Trump thing, and then they think, no, Trump's still the president, and he hasn't really gone, and it's all this secret stuff going on, and then the COVID vaccination stuff, and thinking that this is like the end times, and that all these events are like, they're this remnant, and this is the end times, and they're chosen by God, and they're the only right ones. It's just gotten really, really weird.
Hearing that since I can remember. So 35, I mean, it could be tonight, revival is here.
Yeah.
You just don't know. I mean, I wonder how they don't get exhausted after 30 years of,
And that's the other thing too, because I think when you go into the service and the mood and the expectation of your mood, and your response is like, yeah, Jesus is alive. Yeah, salvation. And constantly, how do you, does anyone really feel a thing that, or is it just this pressure, or are people kind of heightened and elevated, and it's kind of inducing this response? Because that's another thing, like to kind of induce this emotional response makes you a lot more suggestive too. But I just feel like that feeds into that kind of hysteria. Yeah. I think there's things that don't help for someone who's mentally ill or prone to that, or people who may not have even had a sign of mental illness. Like, I just feel like it's, not healthy.
What? Chicken and egg stuff, hey, like.
Yeah.
How much does that, how much, if you repeat the message to people that, this Bible was written for you, it's, anything could be applicable to your life. I don't know how it works.
Yeah. This is God's word to you. And if you kind of read something and you feel like that could be saying, and you're looking for, you're active, oh, is God speaking to me? Oh, yes, this verse jumps out at me, has absolutely nothing to do with anything. And you're, oh, yes, that's God telling me that he will smite my enemies, who is my boss that gave me feedback I didn't like this week, And if you look at even like the way things have gone with Brian Houston, a lot of, since he's left, and the way him and Bobby are responding to things, and then language they're using, it's all very delusions of persecution.
Oh.
They think they're persecuted, and all these Bible verses that they're the righteous and they're the enemies. It's like, who's your enemy? Who? Someone sharing their truth, someone sharing their impact of your behavior. And I think it's just this constant, they're constantly this like victim of persecution in every turn, every single person in every single turn, and every person that has something to say or has an experience that wasn't glowing.
Oh, just we've seen very much with Bobby, like you were talking about the delusions of reference, like she's compared herself to all kinds of people, including Anne Frank, various posts. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the whole use of the word narrative, and I'm so tired. I want to punch someone in the face. I'm just playing that word. I can't handle when Christians use the word narrative, because I've just heard it so much from that Hillsong victim space.
Okay.
It's like, interesting. It's like, yeah, cool. There was some news articles you didn't like. Okay, cool. But you have literally like, you're not looking at the facts. You're not addressing the facts. It's like, this is what's happened. You know, like there's reasons that Brian's no longer there. Looking into their finances, there's documents that have come out. Like, are you going to argue with the documents and talk about context and some journalists you don't like? Or are you going to say, actually, this is exactly what the documents say?
Well, why do you think they're posting like that then?
Because I think they're so far up there. You know, what's with this? They're so far. Like, the culture of the church is like, this is the effect that their services and the way they do their church has on people. This is the way that it's influenced. Like, I just think they convince themselves, because I think they, you know, when you're at the top, you want to surround yourself with people who aren't going to challenge that. Like, you can't be wrong. They can't be wrong. That's not true.
And I just wonder if, you know, if those messages are even meant for thinking people, or if they're just for the next crowd or something, you know, like he's not hoping to convince you.
But who's it? Like, the thing is, it's all loaded language. It's like, who's the enemy here? Who's the enemy? People who say things you don't like. One, people who speak out about mismanagement of money, or the fact that they were sexually assaulted or harassed. Who's the enemy here? There's never a definition. It's just basically anyone that says things that I don't like or speaks out.
And here,
or someone writes an article.
How does that affect like a mental health condition? Because that vagueness, it's all deliberately vague. And Scott Morrison, when he was Prime Minister, used to do exactly the same thing, so that you can't hold him to anything specific. Enemy.
Well, it's all very loaded. It's all very loaded language. It's all very obtuse. And I think it's also just a way, the more they can hide. And I think Brian and Bobby especially, because, you know, if they're at the top and they just surround themselves with, you know, people who are going to like worship them and not challenge anything and not say this stuff, and the people who do are kind of pushed out. They're not like, where's their opportunity for self-awareness?
Oh,
I think they become less and less and less and less self-aware over time.
But
to you know, come out, like when it's just the absolute face of all of this stuff, it's all come out, and it's all, you know, stuff is facts.
But there's no consequence. There's been almost no consequence.
Addressing the fact, it's like, well, they keep talking about, the church. It's like, if I don't know,
I mean, I'm interested in when, like, if you can tell me like a bit about when you maybe had an episode or something happen while you were attending church. Like, as you say, you go along, and then when did it hit home? Because like during my adolescence, it was all about demons of mental illness was demonic. And if you cast a demon out, it would all go away or something.
Some of that was in the background. I think at the time I joined, it was starting to evolve less, like spiritualizing every single thing towards, I think it was slowly becoming a bit more progressive and around the mental health stuff. Like, I have to say, in terms of what pastors or leaders said to me, or their mindsets around mental illness, I didn't have a terrible experience. I think most were pretty supportive. Okay. I think it was just more like, in terms like socially, I felt like there was a lot of, it was more like the pity one. It's like, oh yeah, there's that depressed girl, it's a girl with depression. And it's like, cool. And now we all know that's like, you know, 1 in 4 or 5 people have like a major health episode in their lives, and we don't have to keep pretending like we don't anymore. But I think it was just more of like a sympathy vibe at that time, which I really felt, I think, when I know we'll talk about this another time, but when I went into Mercy Ministries and the way we got looked at, like we used to get gawked at in church, sitting up there every week. It's like, oh, there's the girls doing the hard work. Go girls. But I think after Mercy, I think around like the mental health stuff, there was a time I tried to apply for Bible college. And the form asked me some really weird questions, and I feel like Bible college was still kind of another bubble within the Hillsong, and I think it retained a lot of that old stuff, and a lot more control went on. And I remember the form asking me about all this stuff, and I think I remember it asking me about, like, you know, am I in sin, and sexual things, but I think I definitely really specifically remember her asking me about medication. Am I on any medication? What is that medication for? And I wrote it down because I was on medication. And the pastor who I was close to in pastoral care, like she was like, oh yeah, you should go, you should apply. No, you're doing really good. And then I applied and then it got knocked back. I got this letter saying, unfortunately, I wasn't successful and they had prayerfully considered my application. And when I called them, she was kind of surprised. She said, that's weird. And then when I called the number and talked to the guy and he just said, yeah, we prayerfully considered it. And it's like, what does that mean?
Mhm.
But my absolute gut feeling is that I was on medication and that was too sinful. Like I was like, yeah, I had a mental illness that I would take medication. Well, I'm pretty sure.
From all the memories, the accounts of college students, the conditions can really exacerbate or create mental health struggles that are, quite serious at times.
Yeah.
So maybe they already know how much stress they put people under and figured,
I think the bubble within, because I did, like for a lot of that time, I did live with college students. So I did see the pressure they were under. And I know about the stories and people who've come forward since then as well. And I think the way, like the amount of pressure they put them under, the amount of hours they had them serve and the amount of control they exerted over them and their lives and the punishments there, I don't know, moral failings, what do they like to, the language they like to use, for things. And just, I remember that blog that came out was talking about, like, oh, you had to confess everything. You had to go through a fine-tooth comb and confess, oh, have you ever masturbated? Have you ever done this? And it's like they just hone in on something and then suddenly, oh, they think you're gay and therefore you can't serve in children's ministry or something. I feel like Hillsong College was a bubble, like a really, really toxic bubble underneath the outer Hillsong bubble that was kind of starting to progress a little bit, but I think it was more on the surface. And obviously I wanted to attract people. But the Hillsong College bubble, I think it was so much more easier to take advantage of people without having to do this nice dance around everything.
Yes, you heard correctly. Sarah was one of those lucky women who graced the halls of Mercy Ministries and has done a lot of advocacy around that as well. And we will be moving on to that, hopefully being joined by one of her colleagues. And of course, there's part 2 of Delusions of Reference. We were interrupted by the waking of a small child, but we did continue on, and that will be with you very, very soon. Thank you so much for taking part in this conversation. If you've got thoughts, anecdotes, ideas, messages, please do send them on. It's a really important issue. It's something we really need to crack open and bring into the light. The mental illness that is caused by Hillsong and churches like that is caused by the culture, the pressure, the environment, the music, the lights. There are endless factors. So if you've been affected by that, by all means get in touch, send us a message, leave a comment, tell us what it's been like for you, because from trauma to bipolar to religious trauma syndrome, there's just so much here. So thanks for listening. Stick around, part 2 won't be long. And keep being kind to yourself. Keep being kind to the people around you. And keep Leaving Hillsong. And we'll talk soon. Bye.